Good evening and welcome. My name is Leslie Smith. We are so excited that you are here to join us. We're going to take a couple of minutes to allow our participants to chime on in and get in the room. I am beyond ecstatic about tonight. This is a panel that has been in the works for quite some time, something that we've been wanting to do, and I am so grateful and honored to have my fellow alumni Tigers here with me tonight. So um, as soon as the participants kind of level off, we will get started. How's everyone feeling tonight? You all good? You ready?
Amazing.
Great.
Halfway through the week.
Yeah. Yeah.
So good. Yeah. Wednesday is a good day for me.
Come on in the room. Come on in the room. Lauren, you're in New York. Is that right?
So for the last decade-ish, I was living in New York. I relocated because of COVID. So
Okay.
I'm close to my mom in Charlotte, North Carolina right now.
Nice. Charlotte is nice. And Miss B, where are you located?
San Diego.
Ooh, that is like my utopia city. I love San Diego.
Yeah.
So wonderful. And Jen, where are you located?
Chicago. I was saying your utopia is not Chicago?
It's not. That's why I no longer live there.
I'm with you on that one.
I can't. Too cold. It's too much. Too much. Sorry, D'Angelo, because I think you're from Chicago.
I am.
Still love you though. Still love you.
I love Chicago. Wish I could live there, but it's just too cold.
Right. Charlie and Jay, where are you? Where are you logging in from?
I'm logging in from Dayton, Ohio, where it's been snowing and nice and cold. So
yeah,
not too far away from Greencastle.
I feel your sentiments.
I'm in Connecticut where we've got snow and it's chilly.
Awesome. Well, I think we are ready. Again, welcome to tonight's event. Again, if you didn't hear me before, but I am beyond excited, ecstatic about tonight's event. This is our first Black History Month panel entitled Amplifying, Understanding, and Embracing the Black Voices of DePauw. I am honored and grateful for my fellow Tiger alumni that have joined us this evening. The panel will be moderated by someone I know pretty well, I would say. His name is Isham J. Bennett, class of 1991. He is married to my stalwart, Lisa Bennett, and I have known them, oh my gosh, over half of my life. So I don't know if that makes, I don't know who's old. I don't know if that makes you old. I don't know. So I think maybe I'm old and you're wise. Maybe that's what it is, Jay. So I am actually going to turn it over to him. I'm not going to go through the lengthy bios. That was in the registration. We will go ahead and paste that in the chat if you want to learn more about their professional careers. But I'm going to hide myself and Jay, go ahead and take it away. Thanks again for being here.
Thanks, Leslie. Appreciate the introduction and welcome everybody. It's good to see you. You know, in full disclosure for those that have joined us, we had a chance as panelists to connect a couple of days ago for the first time. And I was just struck by the conversation, the ease of flow, the dialogue we had, and we got into some pretty heady issues. And so I think we're going to continue some of that with all of you tonight. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. You know, we've got a number of people with us. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in just a minute. But I was looking at the class years, and we've got Ms. B, who is going to celebrate her 50th reunion this year. I'll be celebrating my 30th this year. You know, we've got Jennifer and Charlie, who are coming up on 20 years, you know, each. Lauren, you know, this is going to be your 10th year reunion. And then we've got D'Angelo, who is a current student and just soaking it all in. So, you know, we don't have the 80s here, but, you know, that's how the 80s were, you know, and no disrespect to those on the phone who are from the 80s, you know, Alan Hill, and Wanda Span, and several others that I know. But the great thing about DePauw at the alumni level, for those who are, you know, students, other alums on the phone, we've got some recently admitted students, I understand, and others within the DePauw family. The connections really start to mature and become substantive, I think, once you've left the school. And although we span a number of generations and have different experiences, there's a lot about our experiences that are similar. And we'll talk about some of that today. But the richness of the DePauw experience after DePauw is something that I have really appreciated and become fond of. So enough of me kind of kicking things off, to thank all of you for being here and engaging in this conversation. But let's hear from each of you. As Leslie said, all of our bios are posted for those that want to read more about us. But it'll be nice to just hear from you in your own words about who you are and anything noteworthy that you want to share with the audience before we start our conversation. So, Ms. B, I'll begin with you.
Okay. Well, I'm a recovering attorney after 38 years of practice. I decided to pursue my passion of architecture and design. So for the last 10 years, since I retired from the practice of law, I've operated Kemp Interiors, which is a commercial interior design business. Love it. I work with my youngest daughter. I am coming up on 50 years since I finished 4 years at DePauw, originally from Gary, Indiana. And, you know, I have just had a great career and feel really blessed and honored to be here. You can read all of the rest of the stuff if you'd like.
Fantastic. Thanks. Shout out to GI, Gary, right? My hometown as well. Jennifer, how about you?
Sure. Jennifer Enders here, class of '02. I have spent my career since DePauw in technology and financial sales. I am a mom to 4 and love spending my free time helping support women in business through my work as a sales coach with the CEO Chick Network.
Fantastic. And Charlie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Charlie Shivers III, class of 2003, right behind Jennifer. Since DePauw, I went to Indiana University and got my master's in public affairs. I'm currently a senior defense analyst at the U.S. Government Accountability Office, a GS-14 equivalent for those who are familiar with that. I'm in my role, working for GAO, which is the congressional watchdog. I've led reviews of major defense and homeland security acquisition programs, including programs such as the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, which is DoD's most expensive acquisition ever, among a myriad of other, programs. I'm a proud parent of 2 children. I've married a fellow DePauw alum from 2003. So we got married actually on campus, little note there. And I'm looking forward to this excellent panel discussion.
You guys went all in on the whole marriage and relationship thing on campus, right?
Yeah.
Lisa and I were thinking about getting married at DePauw. We love the campus, but wasn't part of it. Lauren, how about you?
Oh, I am going to get married on DePauw's campus. I just have to find a husband first. So I am Lauren Clark. I am a Canadian, a writer and an actor, recently a podcast host. I host a show called the Black Creator Connection Podcast, and I interview Black artists to amplify those voices because someone's got to, you know what I mean? I'm originally from Indianapolis, Indiana. And yeah, coming up on 10 years, crazy. And I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic, thank you. And last but not least, D'Angelo.
Hey everyone, my name is D'Angelo McDade. I did not graduate yet, so I graduate next year, class of 2022. You possibly can't tell, but I am the youngest out of us all. I'm an educational policy and then leadership and development and student affairs major, hailing from the west side of Chicago, the best city in the world.
Okay, we'll just leave that there. Fantastic. No, thanks for those introductions. Really appreciate it. We've got a lot of questions to get through and what I know is going to be a fantastic conversation and discussion. So as I shared with all of you, we'll make this real organic and just kind of let the conversation go where it goes and try to, reflect on our own experience and, be inspirational while also practical at the same time. So, I was thinking that You know, it's been 133 years, believe it or not, since Tucker E. Wilson graduated in 1888, first Black alum. And given the, you know, variety of experience we've got here in terms of majors and what you did at DePauw, what you're doing professionally, I want to hear a little bit about what your experience was like as a student at DePauw. You know, when I reflect on my own experience joining DePauw in the late 80s and coming out in the early 90s, you know, we were part of Dr. Bottom's first, you know, experiment, if you will, with diversity on a campus that was very regionally focused, very majority in terms of the student body. There were 26 in my class and 7 upperclassmen altogether. And it was quite a change for the school, quite a change for all of us. But we persevered and made it through. But as you think about your own experience, how would you characterize what was happening at that time, what was going through your mind, and anything that struck you that would be noteworthy about the experience? And we'll kind of start in the same order as introductions and kind of, you know, go from
Way back when.
well, I'm trying to figure out a better way of saying it. That's probably the best way to present day. So
That's okay.
Yeah.
You know, when you said your class was 26, I was thinking, wow, over the 20 years between the time I graduated and of course entered 4 years before in 67 and when you entered, that was more than 3 times the number of African-American students in my class. There were 8 of us who were brought in for the class that started in 67. And as I recall, there were 4, maybe 4 upperclassmen who were there at the time. So it was a pretty small group. And coming from predominantly an all-Black environment in Gary, Indiana, it was absolutely culture shock for me. I had no idea what I was stepping into. And fortunately, it was clearly meant to be because we just all pretty much bonded to support one another. You know, the campus was then 99% Greek, no Black Greek organizations, and none of us were rushed or even for the possibility of that. Things had not come that far in 67. So it was an interesting experience. Probably the best part of the 4 years for me were the friendships that I made and maintained with my fellow African-American students, and that I still maintain with 2 of them. So it, you know, interestingly enough, when I hear about the issues that are currently on campus, it saddens me to say, 50 years later, no difference. What D'Angelo is going through right now mirrors very much what we went through between 1967 and 1971.
you think about social unrest during that period of time.
Yeah, well, we lived through some pretty tumultuous times. We had the assassination of Dr. King. We had the uprisings of the late 60s and the 70s, the riots, the Black Panthers. We sat in at the dean's office and demanded things like the African American Student Organization as well as the House. And I don't even know if you still have a house, but we actually had, they gave us a place to call our own. We didn't live there. But it was very, it was a very different experience. But as I look back on it, there was great benefit. There was great trauma, but there was also great benefit.
We'll pull on that thread a little later, you know, the trauma and the benefit in just a bit. Jennifer, how about you?
So when I entered DePauw in 98, 99 was my freshman year, I'll have to say the Black Greek organizations were definitely growing and thriving at that time. AAAS was definitely a large organization on campus that was very active at the time. So as we've kind of shared our experiences, I feel like that really set the tenor for a different feel for the years that I was there. I definitely felt, though there was some opposition, there was, inherent differences in the majority and the minority, that we actually had a real sense of community. And I think that that really helped allow me to build some strong relationships. As Bea mentioned, that I still have numerous friends that I'm associated with, whether they were in my sorority or not. And so I can definitely tell there was a difference from your time, Miss Bea, to mine as well. And I'm grateful for that. I think that that sense of community that is established through NPHC, through AAAS, is vital to the enjoyment and the growth and the development and allowing minority students, Black students, to excel, for sure.
Absolutely. And I want to talk a little later about organizational support and what role that plays in the lives of students and the impact it had on us, and even still as alumni, how it might have shaped us. So thanks for that, Jennifer.
Mm-hmm.
Charlie.
Yeah, since I was just, I think, a year behind Jennifer, I think at the time that I got there, there was to me, a small but critical mass of other Black students, as well as others, that I was able to really bond with through some of my activities that I got involved in. Primarily student life. I was a resident assistant for a couple of years, and also served on student Congress exec as the VP of Academic Affairs, got involved in certain committees. But while it wasn't maybe a large number in terms of total quantity, I did feel that the community that we had was important. And those longtime relationships that I won't say his name, I know he's watching, but I mean, I was able to, develop with people, and also bond with a certain person who, I mean, he's closer to me than my own blood brother. And so just those relationships, and even through social media, for, it's good and bad things. How do I say that our Black students have really kept in contact over the years through that medium.
Great. Thanks, Charlie. How about you, Lauren?
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear you guys talk about your experiences, because when I was at DePauw, it was 2007 to 2011. And these were the Obama years, you know what I mean? So I feel like, also having grown up in Indianapolis, 45 minutes away from Greencastle, it felt like I wasn't really going too far from home. DePauw was very, very similar to the high school that I went to. So honestly, DePauw was not really a stretch for me. And I think part of my upbringing, what I noticed in my surroundings, was very heavily focused on diversity. And it wasn't really until I moved to New York City where I started having more conversations around equity. And this is something that we talked about last week when we were all getting acquainted. But I think that is probably my biggest takeaway from DePauw. My personal experience was more like I was looking for other Black people, but not necessarily having conversations with them. I joined a predominantly white sorority and was the only Black woman in that sorority, which was, I'm not gonna lie, kind of a struggle that I didn't anticipate. But I'm also grateful for it.
Thanks, Lauren.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of questions are coming in just based on some of your intros so far. So this is going to be really exciting. D'Angela, how about you? Life as a student today.
I came to DePauw from Chicago, surrounded by people that look like me, talk like me, walk like me, and everything else. And with coming to DePauw, it was for me beyond a sense of what we call culture shock, because every which way you turn, someone doesn't like the way you look, the way that oppression and systems work in opposition to you and those you represent. I remember my freshman year coming into DePauw. I lived in Holgate Hall, and someone wrote the word "N-words don't belong" within the hall there. I was the only Black person on my floor. I made some nice friends there. But in that space, I thought to myself, DePauw is supposed to be the strong institution that backs who I am, that loves me, embraces me, not only academically, but socially and emotionally. And sadly, I thought that stopped within the year of 2019, but evidently it didn't. And even in spite of our current political status of our country, that behavior continues. It's about 120 Black folks on DePauw's campus. Without AAAS, I don't see how we can make it. Ms. B referenced earlier about the AAAS house. AAAS just got that house back last year. And being Black on DePauw's campus is a little bit hard because you're trying to find yourself in every other Black person and try to find a sense of healing. And might I say that there's not many faculty members that look like you that believe in your academic ability, but there are a few like Dr. Leanne Goins, Dr. Carn Wembley, and et cetera. So it's not any different from when Miss B or many of you were here.
So the struggle is real and has been for several years, going back at least 50 and certainly more than that. So thanks for that. This next question kind of gets into, Black History Month, and this being February and all of us celebrating Black History Month. The theme this year is the Black family, identity, representation, and diversity. I'm going to ask two of you to answer this question. It's how does your upbringing influence your experience at DePauw? And I think, given Lauren, your, what some would say, non-traditional career route at this point, where you are exploring life as a creative and doing.
That is so sweet. That is like the nicest way. Can you say that to my parents? Oh my God. That's so nice. Non-traditional? Yeah, that's what it is.
And, let's talk about, how your upbringing influenced your experience at DePauw. And then Charlie, you're working with the government and what some would say is probably the most traditional, kind of a career, also with you, how your upbringing has influenced your experience at DePauw. Lauren, go ahead.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So as I was saying, I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana, and I grew up in a household where we were taught to say what was on our mind. I'm already, most of you can probably tell, I'm a very unfiltered person. And I think the thing that really drew me to DePauw was this idea of uncommon success and just a liberal arts education. I'm gonna go there and get the well-rounded education and just be like a full human being, you know what I mean? And I think going to DePauw and, the various struggles that I had there, I think I learned that I already was enough. I already was whole. And a lot of my education was very affirming, but I suppose, I think something that I'm always trying to do is just really go back to my upbringing and back to my roots, because there's so much in the world that's kind of telling us that we need to work harder to prove our worth. And I wouldn't exclude DePauw from that. So, yeah.
Yeah. DePauw isn't for everybody. And I think one of the struggles of attracting Black students to come to Greencastle and to be successful, because they are going to have to find, what is that internal thing that keeps them going. And they will have experiences that test, whether they can discover that they do have what it takes. So I appreciate you sharing it in that way and putting it in those words.
No problem.
How about you?
From my perspective, I guess I had a different upbringing in terms of my father was in the Air Force when I grew up, and then even after he got out. So we moved around a lot. So I experienced all types of different neighborhoods, and I was always around a diverse group of people, generally, not always. And so going to DePauw was, I won't say it was a culture shock per se. I mean, I grew up out on the East Coast, actually. So I had already experienced culture shock and finishing high school in Fort Wayne. But the counterbalance to that was my father, he experienced racial discrimination once he got into the civilian world. And even I had witnessed my parents being racially profiled. So when I got to DePauw, that really instilled into me, a desire to try to speak out to the extent that I could. For those who did not have the opportunity to be on a campus, they go to a small liberal arts college. And so to the extent that I could, I tried to speak out, via mostly the DePauw student newspaper, and even in classes about, especially people who were not from affluent backgrounds, because one thing I discovered when I got to DePauw was I was, we were not definitely more from a more affluent family, so I was really, really cognizant of that. So I would say, those experiences that really influenced my time at DePauw in terms of what I wanted to focus on outside the classroom, but even inside too.
I think what I've heard both of you kind of, imply and say in so many words is, DePauw is kind of a crucible for all students, not just Black students, but for leadership and personal growth and development. To the extent that you kind of take ownership of your experience, that determines to a great extent what does or doesn't happen for you. But if you're a spectator and, you let the culture shock and, if there's socioeconomic issues, certainly, race and any number of other factors kind of impede your ability to accept it and take ownership and do with it what you will, you probably shortchange the experience. And some of that struggle that we went through was just learning how to grow and deal with some of the adversity that is part of what it means to be Black at DePauw.
I just want to add really quickly, I'm sorry, I don't mean to dominate the conversation, but you had mentioned about even my time in government. It's like one of those things where some of those same issues that maybe we experience there are I've experienced here in government, maybe, but just maybe in a different way. So I just wanted to add that little piece to that.
No, that's a good add. And it kind of gets into this question I've got for Jennifer. We talked about, between you, Charlie, and Lauren, how your home experience, your upbringing shaped what happened to you at DePauw. But, Jennifer, you've got a pretty varied background in terms of, what you've done professionally, what you're doing as an entrepreneur, some not-for-profit type activity. Based on the variety of things that you've done post DePauw, how would you say your liberal arts education and experience at DePauw shaped who you are at this point in your life, both professionally and personally?
The liberal arts experience really helped build my courage, I'll have to say, to know that, as Lauren, mentioned, that I really was a whole person. It helped affirm me in many ways and helped validate my ability to execute in numerous areas. My degree was in music business, so I was in the School of Music, which does, differ your experience as well. That's where I spent most of my time. But as I graduated, my
main school, right?
Correct.
School of Music Culture, yeah.
It is. There's kind of two different schools going on. And as I graduated my senior year, I should say, that fall semester, I was in New York for a semester. I was able to work with New York City Opera. And literally, as soon as we got into New York City, a couple of students from DePauw were there with me as well. We experienced 9/11. And it changed the entire trajectory of course, not only my senior year experience, we were able to remain there, and continue our studies and our work. But as I graduated, my plan was to go into nonprofit arts management, with that music business degree. That was the plan. And it was so clear, and I had opportunities lined up, and went to graduate, and no one was really hiring. Everything just stopped for a while. But obviously I needed to find work, and had the ability then to step into sales. Had no idea that's where I was headed. But really it was a divine appointment. It was such just a natural progression for me, which went into financial sales and technology, which turned into public speaking and now coaching, as a part of what I do in my passion, in helping minority women in business. And So I think the liberal arts education and the rigor of the education that we had at DePauw built my muscles to be able to step out into an environment that was not my plan A and to execute at a really high level and to succeed. And I absolutely have to look back at all of those classes, the teachers, the conversations, the requiring of us to execute on what we're learning, that, you know, I had to go full throttle. And I'm really blessed by the experience, and that my plan A wasn't really the plan A, that the plan B has worked out to be exactly where I should have been.
That's fantastic. I think one of the best kept secrets, and maybe it shouldn't be a secret, but of liberal arts education is the versatility that we all develop. You know, I think about my own career, and you know, it's 4 different industries, it's 5 different companies, it's 6 different, you know, U.S. state moves. It's probably 15 or more different roles, some of which were outside of, you know, my dominant HR background in sales, something I knew nothing about. But given what you go through at DePauw, I think you become more, you know, acceptable of uncertainty and just dealing with it and letting life, you know, throw at you what it will and figuring out how to make it happen. So thanks for that, Jennifer. You know, I want to talk about organizations, and some of you hinted at, you know, AAAS and other organizations on campus. You know, Ms. B, you are a founder of AAAS, and Jennifer, you're a member of our vice president's sorority, and my wife and my daughter's not even of age, she's only 9, but she knows all about pink and green and AKAs, and people drop off pink and green stuff all the time. But, you know, the AKAs were the first sorority, Black sorority on campus. Speak a bit about our organizations like AAAS, Queer Students of Color, NPHC organizations. How do these organizations create a safe space for students, given your experience?
Okay. You know, I can really only speak to AAAS because that was all we had when we were there. But I'm sure that other organizations that have since come up that address particular student needs serve the same purpose. Like I said, you know, the 60s were pretty tumultuous. That was, for me, my awakening to social injustice, inequality. Like I said, we went through the riots that swept the nation, assassinations. Political climate was very similar, different but similar to what we see today and what we saw over the summer. And I have to give DePauw credit for this. We were so emboldened because we were outsiders. We were on a campus where people had an anchor, they had a place to go, they had something to hold on to. It was all Greek, but, and we thought, well, they don't want us there, we want our own. And I think there were 5 of us maybe out of the 8 who we literally had a protest, and we went to the dean's office and we refused to leave. We had to sit in. And it's kind of crazy when I think back on it, and I thought, oh man, you know, we could have been kicked out. A lot of stuff could have happened, but you know, it did not. DePauw responded. And we, you know, we really were able to make some inroads and able to explain the need for us to have the same type of sense of community that other students on the campus had. And that really DePauw had not, I'm sure that no one had really thought about the importance of that. And so we just made real clear what our needs were. We started the organization. As I said, they gave us the AAAS house, and I'm glad to hear that you now have a place to go, because it really became our place, and it made such a difference. I am convinced that because all 8 of the students who entered in my class, we all graduated, 100%. And I don't know, that doesn't happen a lot, but in large part, I think it had to do with the fact that we were constantly there for each other. We were supporting each other. My friend Michelle, who's actually on this call, who also lives in San Diego, she and I both came to San Diego after school. I remember us really pushing each other that senior year and saying, you know, nothing is standing in the way of us completing what we've started. We are going to finish this race no matter what. And it was entirely attributable to the presence of that organization and the bonds that it had. So I would say, you know, I don't know how anybody gets through without that connection.
Thanks, Ms. B. Jennifer.
That's awesome. And I'll have to say, Miss B, you know, when we came through, AAAS was definitely a large part of my experience. I had the opportunity to serve on the executive board, so that legacy still continued into my time. We did also have a house at that time as well. And it was the epicenter of, you know, getting together on the weekends and having events. And that's how I learned about Kwanzaa. I grew up not knowing about Kwanzaa, but that's how I had my first Kwanzaa experience. Like I have so many amazing memories surrounding the house and what we were able to do through AAAS. Of course, as a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, that really defined my experience as well. And for many of you, I think, you know, I had a culture shock when I came to DePauw, but it was opposite of that. I'm biracial. I grew up in rural Illinois. And so my family was the minority in our entire town and our school, very small community. So when I came and saw maybe 60 to 80 Black people on campus, I was like, what?
HBCU.
Right. It was a whole different experience, but I'll say my experience in my sorority, I did have a cousin who was Greek. So I had some understanding of Black Greek organizations before I came to campus, but it did help ground me in a sense of history, excellence in education and community that I just adore. And still today, you know, serving alongside my sorority sisters, excelling in leadership, you know, all of that was a huge part of the community. And definitely am glad to see that that still is happening at some level at DePauw, but definitely as an alum, I'm looking forward to raise my hand and step back in and really help bring those organizations to fruition at another level. As D'Angelo has mentioned, you know, there's definitely a need there.
Well, thanks for that. We've got a few minutes left, and I know we're going to have to pivot to some of the other questions that have been submitted, but I want to get to two other questions that may get into how other people can perhaps be more effective and they're working with our community as allies and so forth. Because I would say, given what Jennifer, you and Ms. B said about organizations, one of the questions that, you know, I've seen come up and it comes up repeatedly is this need for Black organizations. And I think people forget that whether it was, you know, during Ms. B's time or before, and people were excluded and these things were created, or Jennifer, you know, during your time where you've got a history of an organization with its own heritage, rich traditions. It's been around for 114 years now, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and all the others like it, you know, because color was such a societal construct in this country from the beginning, and that's how Black people were defined. And then over time, it's become part of our identity. For people to think that becoming colorblind is kind of the goal, I think that just diminishes the importance that color plays for all of us in terms of an identity that we didn't have and had to struggle with, and the historical nature of what it means to be Black, based on it being something that was, you know, very negative, that we've, you know, all grown up with as something that we embrace for lack of other ethnic connections that we just don't have. So I appreciate your insight there. So let's pivot to these other two questions before we open it up or get into some of the submitted questions. I would ask how DePauw's been a defining moment for you all. I think you've kind of gotten into some of that, so I won't go there. If we have time, we can certainly do that. But let's talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. You know, D&I is now becoming DEI as we think about equity. We also hear about belonging as another aspect of diversity and inclusion. What can we do? What can DePauw do to continue to better the experiences of Black students and other students of color? So, D'Angelo, I know you get very profound, so we'll we'll have you go first. And remember, we got a clock on it.
I think one of the things that we first have to realize is every student at DePauw loves DePauw. That's one thing we all have in common.
Regardless of color or background. Yeah.
Mhm. But the one thing that not many of us have is the exposure, like our campus. So when we're talking about what can DePauw do to better support our Black students, it's one, the exposure of the Black accomplishment. The ideal of like, to be very honest with you, Black fraternity and sororities on DePauw's campus are slowly dying off. And so how do we necessarily give that exposure to the Black fraternity and sorority life so that students can understand that this is merely something that is meant to build and elevate? The same thing with the exposure of Black scholarship, not just from our students, not just from our faculty, but those beyond. How can we make sure that our students who are currently at DePauw get some networking and mentorship opportunities from not only our Black alumni, but other alumni as well? Because this ideal of reaching back and giving back is not merely just I'm reaching back to leave you where you are, but I'm reaching back to elevate you, to support you, to uplift you. And we often talk about this ideal of like diversity and inclusion, but when are we going to get to this part of actually putting those words into action? We can diversify as much as we want, but if the diversity and the equity is not achieved within our structure, we're still going to be at the same level as we once were. So that's just my take.
And it's a good one. I think about, where DePauw has been over the years. And I've been fortunate enough that, I came through DePauw at a time when I can look back at people, like Miss B. Miss B, you might know Risharda Morris. I think she was class of 74, or Charles Bennett, people that may have come after you. But, my experience spans generations of Black, students and alumni at DePauw. Got 5 senior Black trustees and 1 Black student trustee. Many of us have served on the board of visitors. I chaired it for a year. We're involved with the alumni board. So we're finally at a point where we've reached a critical mass in terms of a body of Black alumni. It's not nearly where it needs to be, but to have influence, to be a force, to understand what it means to get involved with the university, to give back, to participate, to be mentors, to show, that model, I think is what we're called to do. And D'Angelo, you talked about that love for the school. I think depending on a person's experience, it's tested. And I know of Black alumni who love DePauw a little less and haven't been back since they graduated because of that experience. So we've got to turn that around and encourage them to be, role models and inspiration to students who are going through the same things they went through. But given that they've gone through it, they can show that you can make it to the other side and be, that model and example. One last question, I'll get into the audience questions. We're getting into time. 2020 was a hell of a year, but it's changed the way that we talk about, the Black experience. And I wonder how, we can transfer what we learned from 2020 into the classroom. Professionally, I have become unapologetically Black, and that doesn't mean that I exclude people who are not Black, but I've become less concerned about bringing up issues of race and focusing on where we've got a lack of equity, because otherwise I just fear it won't happen. And certainly given what we've lived through, there are people who are adamantly opposed to it and afraid of it. So we've got to move beyond that. But what can we do based on what we've been through to begin to change the experience in the classroom and teach students how to be a little more authentic? So Lauren, I'll let you chime in here, and others as you see fit.
Thank you. Yeah, this immediately opens my heart, because I feel like 2020 was such a transformative year for me, as a performer and a writer, hustling, doing my thing in New York. I feel like when everything happened with Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, it really magnified the need for me to stop focusing on just myself, and like not just figure out what I'm here to give, but help other people do the very same thing. And also it taught me that when I'm hiding my own gifts and not sharing them and trying to build community, that the hell that I had experienced, you know, whether it was in high school or at DePauw or just trying to make it in New York, if I'm not sharing what I feel that I'm here to give and being my true, authentic, unapologetic Black self, I'm leaving other people in hell, you know? So I think that's what the lesson of 2020 was for me, just to say what I want to say and be proud of who I am and what I've come from. And we all have value. We all matter. You know, I believe that I used to doubt that, not in such a forward thinking way, but now it's like, oh no, if you have a pulse, you have a purpose. And it's your responsibility to figure out what that is. And I think now it's just, you know, now more than ever, I hate saying that, but it's kind of true. Now more than ever, we really have to figure out, like, what are we here to give and how can we help each other?
And how can we be excellent, you know, and allow others to be excellent in whatever way that is defined for them, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have to say, I was heartbroken to hear when we met last week, the feeling on campus, which just hearing D'Angelo talk about, you know, everything that's happening, that in 50 years, it didn't change. And I've really grappled with that over the last week since we spoke about it. A lot of guilt there on my part, because I'm one of those who when I hit the road in 71, I never looked back, because I never saw myself having a place at DePauw. It was part of my path, but it was a part of my path that I did not see any future in. And I really felt I've been guilt stricken all week, that really I owed much more to the people who followed me, to the Black students who followed me, than I have given. And so, you know, I think what's important is for us to really understand that we're all connected. It doesn't matter whether you're the class of 71 or the class of 22, that our experiences are always going to be the same. We hope for better. We pray for better. We protest it's cyclical. You know, the same protests that were going on this summer were going on when I was a teenager, when I was in college. But the difference that we can make one-on-one, the difference we can make when we share our experiences, when we support, and when we encourage. And I think probably the best thing that's happened to DePauw is Dr. White. And with regard to how we can address some of the issues, because I feel welcome. I feel welcome because she's there. Honestly, I just have to say it. I mean, there would have been no other reason that I would even consider coming back for a class reunion or sitting on a panel. Makes a difference. So, I think what we also have to remember is that what is happening in the society at large also is reflected on our college campuses. So I know that this has been as difficult a time that it's been for the nation, as difficult it's been for people everywhere, that it has been the same for D'Angelo and his classmates on the DePauw campus. It's just a microcosm of society. So I understand that I have a debt to pay.
Well, we're so glad that you're with us, and it's not guilt, it's just a reality of an experience that a number of alumni share. So we're glad that Dr. White has reached out to you and you've decided to become more involved. And hopefully the Alumni Development Office won't assign someone to you and call you immediately about how to get more involved, but we'll see. So that's a joke, of course, but not really. Given the nature of conversations that came out of what happened, over the last, year, conversations about race, dialogues where people are sharing their personal story. We've got allies that want to become more involved and who have awakened to, this reality that is just, life, being a Black person and trying to make it all happen. What would you say, or what recommendations do you have for white alumni to become better allies for current students and alumni of color? Anybody can take that. I've moved into the submitted questions.
Listen, start there. Sorry. Clearly, I don't know. I feel that sometimes the allies who want to help the most, they have a tendency to also want to take a leadership role. And I don't think that that's necessary. I think it's a matter where you can have a little bit of integrity around it. Doing the right thing doesn't always mean you're going to get recognition. You're not going to get credit for it. You're doing the right thing because it's the right thing. So start by listening and keep educating yourself. If you can do something, but start by listening.
Yeah, I'm going to have to make sure that if you ever need a career in HR, Lauren, we stay in touch, because you kind of on things that I talk about all the time in these conversations. It's about understanding, it's about empathy, and it's about action. And you hit on each one of those. And as allies, they're two different types. There are those that are performative and those that are truly authentic. And those that are performative are the ones that shake their head and say, yeah, we need to do this. And they're in the right meetings, they're being visible. But when it comes to really advocating or being that voice in a room where there aren't any other Black people and non-Black people get real comfortable with whatever the conversation is, it's, sharing an experience or knowing that someone has a reality that's different from what might be shared, and educating a person in the moment. So those are the kinds of things that allies can do. To your point about being active, it's about being authentic and sincere, and stepping up when things get very uncomfortable and awkward.
I think
And,
own the issue.
and I would, oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, own the issue. The problems of the lack of diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's not our problem. Folks have to own that as their issue that needs to be addressed by them. We can't fix it for them. And the absence or the lack of ownership is why we're where we are today and why we continue this cycle. And so until there's truly ownership of the issue, that really, it's not going to change.
And I just want to add, sure to tag along with what both of you said, is that what's key, I think, for allies is to be willing to have a dialogue, and not necessarily a dialogue. I mean, but dialogue with, say, people of color, but also a dialogue amongst themselves about issues of the day. Because it's too easy just to say, hey, you know what, this doesn't affect us, so why do we care? But I think that's where the real hard work gets done, is trying to have a deeper understanding about, or at least try to struggle with that, about, well, why is this an issue? Because I think for too many, it's not to them, it's out of sight, and they don't think about those things at all.
That's really true. Charlie, I've got two questions. One has come through the Q&A, and one was a submitted question. They're both along the same theme, but I'll read the one that was submitted. So what's one piece of advice you would have for a prospective DePauw student and or an adult about your areas of expertise? And you might tie that to what advice you would give to your younger self, as you stepped foot on campus. So let me try to rephrase it. Advice for a prospective student about your experience and what it's done for you and your expertise, and advice you'd give to yourself, knowing what you know now. So anybody can take that. And maybe it's the same advice.
And I'm laughing because the first thing that came to my head was stay away from those cheese fries. No, I eat what you want, live your life. But
The weight will come. You don't need to rush it. It will come.
yeah, I think to make that a deeper point, it's like, just enjoy the experience. I feel like I spent a lot of, particularly my freshman and sophomore year, I overthought a lot of things. I spread myself very thin trying to like do it all and be in every scene. I'm a social butterfly, but I think just, stick to what feels right in your gut. There's a part of you, like there's an inner voice that will not fail you. And I think where I was coming from when I started at DePauw, I was looking for a lot of answers outside of myself. So my advice to my younger self is don't do that, because you know what you need and you can take responsibility for what you want.
I think you're right. We'll have to end it there. I know that Leslie's going to be coming back in, but Lorna, your point is about perspective and balance, whether it's today or several years ago. So I really enjoyed talking with all of you. I'm hoping we can catch up a little bit later, maybe offline, and just continue our conversation. But thanks for being a part of this panel. So Leslie, back to you.
Thank you so much, Jay. You are a professional. OMG. Maybe you have another career, Isham J. Bennett. But I just want to say thank you to all of our amazing panelists. I was going to save this part to the end, but I was thinking maybe we should have a part 2 because we do have some unanswered questions. If you'd be open to that, we can talk about that offline. But I actually have a surprise for all of our panelists as well as our guests. We have a surprise guest that is coming on. I'd like to introduce to you our new president, Dr. Lori S. White. She wanted to come and say hello and share a few words. So Dr. White, feel free.
You're muted.
Oh.
You'd think by now I would know, but at least I'm not showing up in a kitten for those of you who have seen. But it is so wonderful to see all of you. I wanted to thank each and every one of our panelists. Kemp and I go back a mighty long way, at least 20 years when we both lived in San Diego, California. And so wouldn't you know that our lives have come full circle, that I'm president of the institution where she is an alum. And as each one of you told your stories, I saw so many connections. Charlie, I also grew up in a wonderfully multicultural, diverse environment and thought the whole world was like that until I went away to college. And Lauren, I too ended up joining a predominantly white sorority and had similar experiences to yours. And Jennifer, I did my dissertation on the power of joining Black organizations because it was at Stanford when I was a graduate student where I felt like I was actually living a Black experience that I had never lived before at a predominantly white institution, just given all of the Black opportunities to get involved in organizations on campus. And D'Angelo, like you, I very much love DePauw, as does every one of us. And when we criticize, it's because we want to make the institution that we love better. So for prospective students that might be listening, there is no perfect place. This is my 8th institution that I've had the wonderful blessing to be a part of. All institutions have great strengths. All of them have challenges, and all of us are trying to live up to our aspirational values to be a place where everybody is affirmed. And so I just want folks to know I'm committed to doing that work, but I can't do it without all of you on the panel and everybody who is listening in. If we want to make DePauw the place that we imagine and desire it to be, it's going to take all of us working together for the betterment of Old DePauw. So thank you so much for letting me zoom in and be a secret shopper on the call, and just really, really appreciate all of our alums. And Jay, you're a masterful master of ceremonies. So thank you so much for that as well.
Absolutely. Dr. White, thank you so much for stopping in. We truly appreciate your presence, and I'm sure our alumni do as well. Couple of housekeeping, or I shouldn't say housekeeping, closing items, I should say. We have a few upcoming events. There was an email that went out today about the campus symposium on strategic planning, or on the strategic planning process. That is next Thursday, February the 18th with Dr. White. February the 22nd, there is a town hall with Dr. White for the Black Alumni Association. So there was a question that was actually submitted that asked, can you please share the experience of the formation of the Black Student Association, or Black Alumni Association, I should say. And really it was in collaboration with our alumni board. We saw a need, and we are working collectively to launch different affinity organizations. Back in November, we launched our International Student Alumni Association, and we'll be launching a few in the coming months, and actually in the coming years. And then last but not least, we have a book club through our Alumni Engagement Office. The new book club, I should say the new book starts in March. And then we also have a tour of Italy class that is taught by two of our professors, Mike and Francesca Seaman. So you are more than welcome, and we encourage you to sign up for all of these events. We have a lot more in store for you, especially as COVID-19 comes to the 1 year. Oh gosh, I don't want to say reunion, but 1 year that we've been working remotely. We have something up our sleeve there too. So again, panelists, thank you for sharing your stories. As Dr. White said, there's no perfect place, but I can say that I have some pretty amazing and perfect relationships with not only DePauw, but with my fellow alumni who I personally call family. I love all of you so very much. So I don't know if anybody else has any parting words that they just have to get out. No? All right, go Tigers, and wear your mask. Okay, have a good night. Thank you.
Right,
Bye.
thank you.
All right, thanks.